What's up guys, you're watching TCG Fish. Got an MTG standard deck for you today. This is blue-black Tezzeret. So, Nationals was just this past weekend. I played in Singapore. I made it all the way to 7-2 and then got knocked out of contention in the last round of the second draft by Albertus Law. So, not the greatest finish. Sorry to all my fans out there that were hoping to see me at Worlds, but didn't quite get there. So yeah, this is blue-black Tezzeret. Tezzeret has been seeing a bit more play lately, mostly because of Zach Elsick winning the Star City Classic with the Grixis version. Of course, I'm only playing blue-black, so I just want to talk a bit about why I chose to do that, and hopefully give some tips and things to think about for people looking to play this deck moving forward. So I'll just start with the mana base quickly. 6 islands and 7 swamps. Split in favour of swamps because double black for Herald of Anguish is important. 7 swamps. Then the 8 blue-black dual lands, just for most mana consistency. 2 Spire of Industry. So originally I started testing 4 of Spire of Industry, and then I slowly trimmed it down. The reason is you just don't need that much color fixing when you're only 2 colors, and then the life loss is also sometimes important. And the third reason is that on turn 1 and 2 it can conflict with this because it's not an island or a swamp. So you could maybe cut them down and replace them with these 2 with basics as well. I'm not sure what's correct. This is just the position I arrived at before Nationals. The other thing you could try and do is to fit the new Ghost Quarter or if no Dead Land in the space of one of these other lands. Yeah, so just see if you could make that work. But again, I just didn't have time to figure these things out. And the last land is 1 Inventors Fair. So this card is super important, really strong. Both effects, the life gain and the search, can be game winning. You could even consider playing a second copy of this, but again, it's legendary, so that might clunk up your draws a bit. Yeah, just a really, really strong card. One of the reasons to play an artifact deck in standard right now. So that's the lands. Onto the spells. So the main payoffs for playing an artifact / improvised strategy in standard right now are these cards. So firstly, Herald of Anguish. 5/5 is really good right now because Glorybringer is a 4/4 and its exert ability only does 4 damage. So Herald lines up really well against it. Secondly, the other thing in the format that it lines up really well against is Hostage Taker, because you can play it before you have 7 lands because you have artifacts to help ramp it out, but your Hostage Taker opponent probably doesn't. So if you play this on like turn 5 or so, and your opponent immediately Hostage Takers it, then you have a few more turns to 5 removal before they can cast it, because they have to pay it. The only way they can cast it is by paying for 7 mana all with their lands. So that's a pretty nice interaction as well. The minus ability is really strong, especially at the moment because we have indestructible creatures, or just Tezzeret really, that you need to kill, as well as lots of small guys to shoot down. And the discard ability is obviously great, just a one-sided Liliana +1 basically. So whenever you untap with this card, it's really hard to lose because they already discarded 1 card at the end of the turn that you played it, and then they untapped and they couldn't kill it, so they're going to be discarding another card. And then also, once you untap, you have all your mana plus some artifacts, and you can just start wiping out their creatures with the activated ability. Just a really, really, really powerful card. Definitely the reason to be playing an artifact deck at the moment. And then Tezzeret is also really good. So recently Wizards have been designing a bunch of planeswalkers with a sort of similar set of abilities. So examples of this would be Jace from Shadows over Innistrad, Sorin from Shadows over Innistrad, Obnixilis from the recent Zendikar block, and then the new Vraska. So all of these cards basically have +1 draw a card, or get some kind of advantage somehow, minus 2 or 3, kill something, and then minus a lot, win the game. So Tezzeret also fits into this mold, right? So +1, you get an advantage, you get the Lotus Petal artifact. -2 can kill a thing, and then -7, you get the emblem, you win the game. So the reason why Tezzeret is better than all of those is because it only costs 4, 2 blue-black. Whereas Jace and Obnixilis cost 5, and Sora and Vraska cost 6. So, of course, the reason why in a vacuum Tezzeret isn't better is because +1 make a Lotus Petal is in most decks not as good as either drawing a card or getting like a 2/2 Menace Pirate, for example. And also, unless you're playing a bunch of artifacts to support it, the minus ability on Tezzeret isn't very reliable at killing things. But if you build your deck in a way, and of course the ultimate, if you have no artifacts, doesn't really do anything either. So if you build your deck in a way that you avoid all these downsides, then Tezzeret is a really, really efficient, powerful card. So again, it's another strong payoff for playing an artifact deck. And the other good thing about Tezzeret is that not only is it a payoff for having a bunch of artifacts, it also helps enable all your other artifact cards, because every time you plus it, it spits out an artifact. So it helps you ramp into this, for example. Okay, so now we've established that we have a reason to be playing Improvise and a bunch of artifacts. So do we also want to play Maverick Thopterist, right? Because this is the reason to play Grixis. And I think the answer is no. So firstly, is Maverick Thopterist a good card? Probably yes. So it's either like a 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 mana creature. When it comes into play, you end up with a 2/2 bear and 2 flying Thopters. So that's a pretty good rate. Compare it to like Whirler Virtuoso, which is also a pretty good card. So that's like 3 mana, you get 1 Thopter. So just looking at it that way, it's not too bad. But again, it's a 5 mana Improvise card. So if you're paying, Thopterist only looks good if you're paying 3 or less mana for it. So you need to reliably have 2 artifacts to make it worthwhile, basically, to make it 2 cheaper. So once you have this and 4 Maverick Thopterist in your deck, then you're kind of priced into playing way more sources of cheap artifacts to help you ramp them out, and therefore you need to be playing Cogworker's Puzzleknot. So is Cogworker's, now we already said that Maverick Thopterist could be a decent card, like in a vacuum kind of, but is Cogworker's Puzzleknot a good card? And I think the answer is no. So you're paying 2 mana and you get 1 artifact sitting in play doing nothing, and you just get one token. So really not that good at all. But of course, like I said, you're kind of priced into playing it because you have all these artifacts that really demand you making a bunch of you have all these improvised cards that demand you having a bunch of artifacts to help you play them on time, when you have this plus Thopterist. But so what Zach Elsick decided, or the deck, whoever built his deck decided, was that you needed 4 Cogworker's Puzzleknot, or I think it played like 3 Cogworker's Puzzleknot, 1 Servo Schematic, so 4 of that effect, and then also 4 Prophetic Prism. So it decided that because it could have played 8 token bakers, right? You could play 4 Cogworker's Puzzleknot and 4 Servo Schematic, but it decided that no, that's too underpowered. You don't need that much ramp. We can afford to play some things that are less ramp but cantrips, so it makes your deck more consistent. So there's this kind of weird tension there where sometimes you want to have all these things that make tokens, sometimes you don't need so many tokens, you just want to draw cards. And then as the game's played out, you would sometimes draw the wrong mix of these, or you would end up in situations where you had Cogworker's Puzzleknot on turn 2, and then your play on turn 3 was leave up Metallic Rebuke, and you didn't have any other 2-drop. So like, you spent turn 2 basically just making a servo, and then you played your 3rd land and said go, and now all you have is just like Metallic Rebuke, which you could just pay for with all of your lands, and you spent turn 2 basically just not doing anything. So there was this weird like inconsistency / tension where basically Thopterus prices you into playing some number of Cogworker's Puzzleknot, which is not a good card, but so it's not a good card, so you're not playing 8 of the maximum copies, and then therefore you end up with like some inconsistency where sometimes you want the Cogworker's Puzzleknot and sometimes you want the other one. So basically what I said was that this isn't worth the deck building commitment to play Maverick Thopterus, especially when you think that, well, it's just a Whirlo Virtuoso basically. Is that really worth it? And I say no. So instead what I have is, of course you need 2-drop artifacts to help you ramp into your improvised stuff, and I have 8 Prophetic Prism. So 4 Metalspinner's Puzzleknot, 4 Prophetic Prism, and additionally a few more. So I'll talk about all the enablers here right now. So this is 4 Prism, 4 Black Puzzleknot, 1 Key to the City, 1 Spyglass, 4 Pacification Array, and 1, this is kind of the last enabler if you could call it that, 1 Walking Ballista. So ignoring the Ballista, because this was kind of a last minute addition, I think that this is the right number of things to be playing to help enable your artifact cards. So in a vacuum, drawing a card is more powerful than making a 1/1 token. So is this, like, I know you can't really talk about MTG in this way, but in a vacuum, this is better than Cogworker's Puzzleknot. Just because a card from your deck is better than a 1/1 token in general. So we don't, and because we're not playing Thopterus, we're not reliant on having so many token artifacts. And additionally, you're achieving your really good payoffs with more consistency. So when you have these in ×8, you're much more likely to achieve what's almost like your nut draw of turn 2, play one of these, turn 3, play another one of these, play your second land, your third land, because this is turn 3, and now you have this up. So even though you tap 2 lands on turn 3, you have 1 left over and 2 more artifacts. And because these are cantrips, these help you achieve that with much more consistency, right? Because not only can the first one of these find the next one of these, or either of them can find your third land, or the cantrip can also help you draw into this. So when you have some payoff cards that are really good, it's nice to have enablers that help you both ramp into those and draw into those. Yeah, I felt like this, when you play 8 of these, that chain comes up a lot, and it's one of the best things that you can do from turn 2 to 3. So the other enablers that we have here, 4 Pacification Array. So this was in the deck that Patrick Chapin played at Pro Tour Ether Revolt, and I found that it was an excellent choice. So not only does it help you achieve that 2 artifacts by turn 3 Rebuke, and then often on your turn 4 you'll play Tezzeret, which is one of the reasons why that curve works out so well. Not only does that help you do that, but it is just a strong effect. So some people I've played against compare it to like a 1-mana Gideon, right? Like the Gideon of the Trials, you just shut down one thing every turn. It's also very good against haste creatures, because you can activate it as an instant, right? It makes sense. Also, indestructible creatures that you couldn't kill with a normal removal spell, you can just tap them down forever. So, like Tezzeret, for example. And then other big things like Torrential Gearhulk that you don't care about once they're in play. They're very non-threatening once you just keep tapping them. And then the other thing is Bristling Hydra. So Bristling Hydra is very good against normal removal spells because spending 3 energy to counter like a Vraska's Contempt is a great deal for the energy player, but having to pay 3 energy every time you want to stop a Pacification Array activation is not so exciting for the Hydra man. So I was definitely happy with these. Of course, that means because I'm not playing. Sorry, what's the other 1-drop that Grixis deck played? Renegade map. So I am playing more lands to compensate for that. But again, I think this is worth it. So the other enabler cards, 1 Sorcerous Spyglass. So pretty much every deck in the format has something to name with this. Against red, you can name Ramanut Ruins or Chandra. They're often good cards to name. And then against control, you can name either Azcanta or naming Scarab God is very good with this, because when it's just a 5/5 vanilla, this can shut it down easily. It doesn't do anything threatening after that. And then you can name the land that makes vampire tokens. You know, there'll always be something you can name with this. And having access to a way to kill a planeswalker basically off your Inventors Fair is really, really, really valuable. And the downside of playing a card like this in your main deck is mitigated because you're an artifact deck that cares about having artifacts in play, so you can't really be too sad about just playing it on turn 2 and looking at their hand. Definitely worth playing one of in the main deck. And the last dedicated enabler card is Key to the City. So, like I said before, 8 cantrips, really, really strong, because they make your early turn so much more consistent. Like, you can cantrip into lands that you need, or the rebukes or other early cards that you need to help develop and establish a board position with like Tezzeret and things that are actually scary. So these are like a lock. And then I've seen other people try other 2-drops to go with their improvised cards, things like Treasure Map, or maybe even, you know, Sunset Pyramid. So Treasure Map I think is just really bad because if you play it on turn 2, it doesn't do anything. Every time you tap it for an improvised card, you're skipping a turn of putting a counter on it. So it's even more delayed, the payoff, in that sense. And then you have to spend 2 mana plus 3 mana on it before it even ever draws you a card. And then it draws you 1 card per turn times 3 after that. So it's just way too slow. You can't really afford to... There could be a metagame where that would be okay, but then I think you'd just be in such a like a late game oriented control deck. Like you just have to build the deck completely differently. That would just be too weird. Like I can't imagine that the payoff ever makes sense for playing a card like Treasure Map in this deck. Because, you know, even though it makes 3 additional tokens to help you cast improvised things, at that point you're so late in the game anyway that that payoff doesn't even really help you that much. So I'm basically trying to explain why there's all these other 2 mana artifact cards that aren't really good enough. But Key to the City, even though it looks like a really throwaway slot, or just like a fun off, is really good. So the fact that you can get the consistency just by looting cards in your hand away, like tapping it to discard something, then untapping, drawing something, isn't good, but it's okay to have access to that. The real powerful effect is that whenever you tap it to play for an improvised card, you tapped it without discarding a card. So you untap it and then pay 2, and you draw a card for free. So you're already paying 4 mana into this before it draws you 1 card. So it's different. So in that sense, it seems way worse than these. But in many games you'll do this multiple times. Yeah, so it draws you more than one card, which is definitely better than these, often better than this. So that's also good. And then the other thing is that in really, really, really long stored out games, you might be top decking, so you don't want to tap it to discard cards, but also if you didn't top deck an improvised spell, then you can't tap it without discarding a card either. But the answer to that is that Pacification Array can actually tap this. So you have like a JM Day Tome effect that, you know, or like Phyrexian Arena, whatever thing you like to compare that to. You're just drawing one extra card per turn. So that's also really strong. So even though this looks like a silly slot that you could easily replace with whatever other thing that you like, I think this is a really important slot for the deck, and I probably wouldn't cut any of these cards. Maybe one Pacification Array can be replaced, but all of these slots I was really happy with. And the other quote-unquote 2-mana artifact is Walking Ballista. So this was a sort of last-minute suggestion by somebody on the Friday before Nationals, and I was quite impressed by this. So again, you can just play it on turn 2 and it helps enable your artifact synergies. It's an early removal spell, which the deck is sometimes lacking, but also not too bad against control, tokens, enemy planeswalkers, anything like that. Ballista is often quite a powerful card. So not too good in multiples because you can't afford to be charging up 2 at once, right? But just having one to access, not necessarily as like a true-to bullet from your Inventors Fair, it's just a strong card by itself. It fit a nice spot in the deck, and I was quite happy with this as well. So the other main enabler cards, we've already talked about most of the improvised payoffs. So we have Herald and Tezzeret and Metallic Rebuke, and the last one is Battle at the Bridge. So the last one we're playing 4 of. So again, this is Mana Leak, but sometimes better because you only pay 1 mana for it and 2 artifacts which are just sitting there doing nothing. So this card is really, really great. Another main reason to play the deck. You don't really ever board this out either, because again the efficiency is great in every matchup. Even against red game 1, maybe it's a little bit slow, but post board you probably need it because they tend to bring in more slower cards against you, like Chandra and stuff. And then Battle at the Bridge is just the best removal spell. So some people play Fatal Push instead, but it makes no sense to me because in the early turns, that curve I talked about where you go turn 2 Prism, turn 3 another Prism, leave out Rebuke. You can also do that with Battle at the Bridge. So you go turn 2 Prism, turn 3 Puzzleknot, 1 land, tap it, and 2 things, -2/-2 on your creature. So you can kill like a Servant of the Conduit or a Bowmat Courier or any early creature right on time without messing up your curve at all. And then late game it kills many things that Fatal Push will never have a chance of destroying. So Tezzeret, Glorybringer, excuse me, Gearhulks, anything like that. And of course it gains you life. So in a late game top deck scenario, you're often trying to find this card just because it's going to kill the biggest thing and gain you like 10 life. Much stronger than Fatal Push. You can't afford to play too many removal spells at the moment because there are control decks that don't care about them, so they're just dead draws, but the power level of this card is enough that you can play 4 in your main deck and not be sad about it. And like I say, most decks like this are considering playing either this or Fatal Push anyway, so I think that this is the much better call. The one last, I guess, payoff card for playing a bunch of artifacts is Bastion Inventor. So the way the numbers worked out, I thought I just wanted one more kind of Herald of Anguish effect. So this was the next best thing. So sometimes this is better than Herald of Anguish because when you play a Herald of Anguish, often you're behind on the board, so you feel like you need to block something, and then after you do, Lightning Strike or Magma Spray will kill your Herald. So you never have that problem with Bastion Inventor. It can, it's unaffected by the abilities of like Uncrop Crusher, for example, and then you can block the Uncrop Crusher, and then they can't shock your guy after damage to kill it. So it's just really, really good at holding the door. In matchups where with a lot of ground guys, we're trying to be more aggressive. So tokens mainly. The fact that it doesn't fly is a bit of a liability. Of course, you can use Key to the City to make it unblockable, which is really obnoxious in a bunch of situations, but because you're only playing one of each, that doesn't come up very much. So, yep, just another big improvised card. Again, so the way that I felt the numbers worked out, this was what I wanted. Try it out, see for yourself. I quite liked it. And then the last big guy, one Noxious Gearhulk. So this is a very high impact card that you can find with Inventors Fair. Noxious Gearhulk is the perfect card in situations where you're either slightly ahead or slightly behind, because it has a very large immediate effect on the battlefield, both creating a huge creature for you and getting rid of your opponent's huge creature and stabilizing the situation by gaining you a bunch of life. So again, it's an expensive card, and in some matchups, like tokens and control, sorry, I'm feeling a bit under the weather right now. In those matchups, it's not really what you're looking for, but in the matchups where it is good, it's great. And of course it's an artifact, so being able to double up on it with the Inventors Fair is a very strong thing to be able to do as well. So I think that's 56 cards in the main deck so far. So we have these last four, which are Contraband Kingpin. Now, I don't really like this card much. Obviously a 1/4 lifelink for 2 mana isn't exciting, and then even if it scries on average, say once per turn, that's not really too great either. But I just feel that you have to play something like this at the moment because the aggressive decks are just too powerful. So 4 toughness is quite good, and 1 power is also quite good, because Bomat Courier and Earthshaker Kenra both have 1 toughness, and then there's a lot of things that don't have 4 power, so obviously the Courier and the Kenra don't kill this, Uncrop Crusher doesn't kill this, Rogue Refiner won't kill this. So if you can stabilize behind a Contraband Kingpin, you are in a good situation against those decks. So the problem with that is because you don't have so many early creatures, typically your opponent will be ready to remove this, and then you don't have another one. So because it has such little power, it also matches up quite poorly against like Soulscar Mage, because you play this and then they Soulscar Mage and shock it, and now it has no power, so it can never trade or kill anything, and you can't gain life off it either. So yeah, I felt that this was needed, but also at the same time not totally great at what it was supposed to be here for. It's slightly better against it's slightly better in the Grixis version because you have more things that make tokens, so you get more scries. And then also the Grixis version is also generally better against aggressive creature decks, because the Maverick Thopterist gives you a lot of creatures to block with, and also because you have so many 1/1 tokens, you can afford to play Ethersphere Harvester, which is another good anti-aggressive card. So what I would say is that if you feel that you can afford to not play this in your main deck, the deck becomes overall much stronger because you can play either more good enablers or more good payoff cards for your artifact synergies, and this card is at the moment not really much of either. Or alternatively, if you can find a good anti-aggro card that can replace this. So for example, you could like cut these for 4 Fatal Push main deck, and that would also be okay, but now you have like 8 removal spells main deck that sort of blanks against control, and I didn't feel like that was a position you could really afford to be in either. So maybe there is another card out there that's the replacement for Contraband Kingpin, but I couldn't find anything that really convinced me. So onto the sideboard now. So the first sideboard cards I want to talk about, 2 Crook of Condemnation. So these are really good. Against blue-black control, everything they have is a threat that relies on the graveyard. Or sorry, every threat they have relies on the graveyard. Torrential Gearhulk, you can just eat the target. Also Scarab God, you can just eat the target. Both of those cards become really ineffective versus Crook. And if you minus your Tezzeret to kill the Scarab God, you can exile it before it comes back. As Cantor, every turn you just exile 1 card. It takes them twice as long to flip it if they ever do. And whenever they get to a point where they're about to flip it, you can just sacrifice this and exile their whole graveyard. And then they're forced to start over. So the fact that this shuts down basically everything scary out of that deck for 2 mana is great. And compared to other decks, because you want to play artifacts on turn 2 and 3 anyway, so you aren't even really, this isn't even like a dead card in your deck. I almost played Grave Hate, like 1 piece of Graveyard Hate in my main deck for a while, but I just thought that it was too useless in some matchups, so I cut it. So yeah, this is really strong, and against other decks. So if God-Pharaoh's Gift ever becomes like a popular thing to do, then this is obviously great against that as well. And against tokens, for example, just being able to exile the Anointed Priests in the graveyard, or they often board in the Embalm Angel against you, or exiling their start to finish so your Heralds survive. They're all great options in that matchup too. So again, this is a really good card. I wouldn't play less than 2, and if the late game decks were popular, I would consider adding a 3rd one. So against other sort of grindy matchups, we have 2 Negate. So some people have played Jace's Defeat in the slot instead, but I don't think you should do that at the moment. So you have these cards instead to answer the blue creatures, so Scarab God and Blue Gearhulk. And then this also counters Second Sun, which Jace's Defeat doesn't do, and then Anointed Procession and Hidden Stockpile from tokens. Jace's Defeat obviously doesn't answer those. So yep, Negate is the pick at the moment. And then we have 2 Reverse Engineer. So drawing 3 cards for potentially just 2 mana is really good. I used to play these main deck, but again, I think the format's a bit too aggressive for that. Anytime you can afford to play these main deck, definitely go for it. It's just a really strong generic effect. Drawing 3 cards helps you pull ahead quite nicely. As this sort of generic advantage card for like mid-range or control matchups, I tested Tezzeret's Touch, but that card's just not very good. So in a vacuum, it's quite strong, because basically a 5/5 haste creature is good for 3 mana, and the fact that when it dies, it returns the value. So if you put it on a Prophetic Prism, then you get to draw another card. Or if you put it on a Metalspinner's Puzzleknot and they try and remove it, in response you can activate the Puzzleknot. So then you draw 1 more card, and then the Puzzleknot goes back to your hand, and then you play it again, and then draw another card. So it's both like a big threat and a source of card advantage. So the reason why I don't like it though is just because there's so much removal in the format that exiles. So if you play it and then they hostage take your 5/5, that's a really bad exchange. Same thing, but if they use Vraska's Contempt on it, that's also not that good either. And if they abrade the target in response to the Tezzeret's Touch, that's also bad. So in general, abrade is not very good against you, because all of your payoff cards are non-artifacts, and all of your artifacts are just cheap enablers. So for example, like using a Braid on a Prophetic Prism is obviously not a very good trade for your opponent most of the time. But when you put things like Tezzeret's Touch in your deck, they have much better options for their Braid, so I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. So yeah, Tezzeret's Touch didn't impress me, but Reverse Engineer I was much more happy with. So now we have cards that are more for aggressive decks. 2 Filigree Familiar, 2 Fatal Push, and 2 Yahenni's Expertise. So Expertise, really good. So a lot of things have 3 toughness or less that you really care about. So for example, Will of Virtuoso, all of the early drops out of Teemo, so Will of Virtuoso plus all its tokens, the Rogue Refiner and the Servant of the Conduit as well. Kills all of those. Bomat, Uncrop, what's its name, the Menace Pirate Karizev, you know, every early drop out of red decks as well. And also you have Contraband Kingpin, which has 4 toughness. Your Heralds have 5 toughness, and your Bastion Inventor has 4 toughness, so none of your stuff dies to your own Yahenni's Expertise. You hardly ever use the caster card bonus part, because by this time you've probably already played out all of your Puzzleknots and things like that. So that's a little bit of a downer, but just 4 mana, all creatures get -3/-3. Just a powerful effect that it's nice to have access to. Fatal Push, just more removal. You could play like 3 Expertise and 1 Fatal Push, or some other split like that. I wasn't exactly 100% sure about how this should go, because yeah, I think that would be better, because when I first was testing I thought you wanted like a mix of these against Temur, for example, or Mono Red, just to sort of like stabilize yourself a bit before you get to this effect with the Fatal Push. But I think even in those matchups you just want more Yahenni's Expertise, so maybe like 3 and 1 is better. And then Filigree Familiar was just like another kind of Contraband Kingpin kind of card, and in a way I think it might actually be better even in the main deck. So the problem I talked about before with the Kingpin was that because you have no other removal targets, especially early on, normally you play Kingpin and your opponent will be prepared to kill it, but at least with Filigree Familiar it gained you 2 life, and when they killed it, it cycles. So, you know, that's nice. The only thing this really gets punished by is Magma Spray, and normally that's only like a 1 or 2 of in decks like Red and Teemo. So, and especially your opponent. So for the situation when in the Nationals, when I only played this in my sideboard, obviously nobody's keeping Magma Spray against you for game 2 and 3, and even if you play this main deck and they decide to keep their Magma Spray in, that might not even be that good for them. I mean, you're still just trading 1 for 1, so there's a limit to how bad it can be. What I did think about after I registered this card in my sideboard was like, hang on, am I stupid? Isn't this card just worse than Gifted Aetherborn? And then I realized, well, no, not really, because this is an artifact, so you can tap it to play your Heralds and things like that, and that definitely came up during the event. So yep, Filigree Familiar, good card. Like I said, I would try this main deck over Contraband Kingpin now that I've had more experience with it. Last 3 cards, so we have 1 Lost Legacy. This was mainly an anti-Second Sun card, for obvious reasons, but then I realized that it's also quite good against tokens. So the tokens engine of Hidden Stockpile plus the Legion's Landing plus Anointed Procession will always overwhelm you eventually. Like once they build up to a scary amount, you have this to make them reset and start over, but again, that's only like a temporary solution. So your main plan for winning the game is do that while racing in the air with Heralds, and hope that you can kill them before they gain a big enough board that can kill you. So what I found was really good actually is this, to break up some part of the engine. Like Anointed Procession without token makers is not very good. token makers without anointing procession is obviously much less good as well. So just being able to take away all of their a big chunk of their engine, like a critical part of the engine, every single copy with this card, I found was worth doing. I don't think I would board it in. I don't even board it in against like blue-black control. It's only for second sun and tokens, but I think for one slot it's worth it just for that. And then the last two cards are some really spicy meatballs. So one, Metalwork Colossus. Now I was watching this documentary called Pacific Rim, and in that they have a big monster that comes up, but they defeat it with a big robot. And then I realized that Carnage Tyrant can't be targeted by Tezzeret or Battle for the Bridge, and also Yahenni's expertise can't sweep it away. So it's pretty good against this deck, but it's only a 7/6, so a 10/10 robot handily beats it. And against control decks, it's just a 10/10 robot. Like, they have to answer it or it kills them really fast. So if they kill it by normal means, so with like an abrade or something, then you can sacrifice 2 artifacts easily to bring it back and go again. The problem is that a lot of removal at the moment, especially for big cards like this, exiles, so you have no way to get it back. That's a bit stink. So for future events, maybe this card isn't worth it because nobody's playing Carnage Tyrant and a big vanilla creature isn't enough. So this is probably like one of the least exciting cards from the sideboard, but it does do a lot of damage, and you do have Key to the City in your deck, which can make it unblockable, which can help you win games that you otherwise wouldn't. So the most memorable match of the tournament was the last round against tokens, where my opponent's on 24 life, and I have I can't explain the situation actually unless I spoil the next card. So 1 Planar Bridge. And you see this card and I know what you're thinking, like, have I accidentally wandered onto an EDH deck profile? Did you try and make a Tezzeret theme deck featuring every single card with Tezzeret in the artwork? Like, what's going on? So this is just like Scarab God, and the activated ability makes a copy of any card that you have in your deck, basically is what it does. Like, it's just a late game card that goes over the top of every single other thing that can be done, basically. So in those late game control matchups, it's just like a strong non-creature thing, again, that can be found by Inventors Fair. So what I was doing in that game that I explained was that my opponent was on 24 life, and I had this Tezzeret, Key to the City, and a Herald, and that was it, or plus like a few other artifacts. So end of the turn I activate this, search for this, untap, minus Tezzeret on this, make it 15/5, sack off Crook of Condemnation, so now I only have 4 artifacts, play another Tezzeret from my hand, minus the new Tezzeret on this, now it's 19/1, tap Key to the City, make this unblockable, attack for exactly 24, unblockable because he couldn't block the Herald in the sky. So my opponent was just absolutely dumbfounded by that. But it sort of illustrates the kind of unstoppable late game that you can assemble with only 1 or 2 Planar Bridge activations. And even if it just spams out a Herald every turn, that's often just good enough by itself. So this card maybe not necessary, but for Planar Bridge I quite like for having access to that effect. And yep, that's the deck. So hopefully I've explained why I just like blue-black rather than Thopterus. Thopterus doesn't seem too good at the moment. What I would like to find is a replacement for Contraband Kingpin. So for now, I want to